The desert didn't look cruel at first. From a distance, it was all clean lines and bright space, pale hills, scattered brush and sky so wide it felt like a dare. But up close, the desert was honest in the way a blade was honest. It didn't pretend anything would be fine. It simply waited for you to run out of water, out of shade, out of time. That afternoon, the sun wasn't shining so much as pressing down. It flattened the world into heat and glare, turning the two-lane service road into a shimmering ribbon that seemed to float above the ground. The air smelled like hot stone and creosote sharp enough to taste. Even the wind felt tired. From the cab of his dust-coated pickup, Wade Harlow watched the horizon blur and sharpen in slow pulses, like the land itself was breathing through clenched teeth. The dashboard thermometer blinked 106 degrees. Wade kept one hand on the wheel and the other loosely resting near the radio clipped beneath the dash. His clipboard lay on the passenger seat beside a folded map wedged into the visor. Everything about his day was routine measure. The canal flow check the gate valves, scan for leaks, listen for the wrong sounds. That was his job now. Not glamorous, not heroic, just necessary. He worked for the county water district, the kind of position that became invisible unless something went wrong. Out here, water wasn't a convenience. It was policy, survival, argument, and prayer, all wrapped into one thin, managed thread. The canal Wade followed fed the aging Mesa Verde Dam, a concrete spine, holding back a shallow reservoir in good years and a ghost of one in bad years. This year felt like it wanted to be bad. He'd been out since dawn, boots and dust skin tight with salt. He'd already checked 3 culverts and replaced 1 cracked gauge. The sun climbed higher, the heat thickened, and Wade kept moving because stopping felt like losing ground. Then the routine snapped. He saw it first as a shape half hidden in the brush, a patch of golden brown that didn't belong. Too large. Too still. Wade tapped the brakes. The truck rolled forward a few feet and stopped with a soft crunch of gravel. For a moment he just sat there, the engine humming the air conditioner, fighting a losing battle, and the desert holding its breath outside the glass. His first thought wasn't brave. It wasn't even rational. That's not real. In this county, wild usually meant coyotes, rattlers, bobcats. Sometimes a mountain lion if you were unlucky. But what lay ahead didn't belong to any category his mind could file without breaking. He stepped out and the heat hit him like opening an oven. A smell rose next, musky, sharp, unmistakably animal, layered with bitter dust and dry sage. Wade moved slowly, careful not to make sudden noise, and stopped at the edge of the brush. It was a lion, not a mountain lion, a lion. An African lion, the kind you saw behind glass at a zoo, or in documentaries narrated by calm voices from cool studios. A full-grown male lay on his side as if the desert had simply decided to put him there and forget him. Wade felt his mouth go dry. The lion's mane was tangled and sun-faded, clumped with dust burrs snagged in it like the land had tried to claim him. His flank rose and fell shallowly each breath, thin and measured like he was counting them. One front paw was tucked tight against his chest at a guarded angle that made Wade's stomach tighten. Injury, pain, something old enough to force that kind of protective posture. Wade didn't move closer. He knew what a big cat could do, even dying. He'd grown up around ranchers who talked about predators the way they talked about storms. Unpredictable, indifferent, deadly if you underestimated them. Wade wasn't the kind of man who confused fear with respect. Out here, you respected what could end you. The lion's eyes cracked open. Amber but dulled less, the bright gold of a creature at full strength, and more like old whiskey left in the sun. For a moment those eyes fixed on Wade with a focus that made the world narrow. The lion didn't snarl, didn't roar, didn't even lift his head. He just looked. Wade realized he'd been holding his breath. It wasn't fear alone that locked him in place. It was something stranger, the sheer wrongness of it. A king of another continent collapsed beside an Arizona canal like a broken statue, like the world had misfiled a soul. Wade took one slow step back toward his truck and pulled his phone from his pocket. No bars. He lifted it higher. Still nothing. He walked 10 paces up the road, lifted it again, and watched the screen stay stubbornly empty. Of course he muttered, but his voice sounded small against the desert. He went back to the truck, opened the driver door, and leaned inside for the old radio clipped beneath the dash. Company frequency was scratchy even on good days, but it was better than praying for a signal. He pressed the button and listened to the click, the faint hiss. "This is Harlow," he said. His throat tightened because saying it out loud felt like inviting the universe to laugh. I've got a lion down near mile marker 17 by the canal." Silence. Then static. Then a voice that sounded miles away, half swallowed by distance and disbelief. "Harlow, say again." Wade swallowed. His throat felt sanded raw. "A lion," he repeated slower. "Not a mountain lion. A lion. Full-grown male. He's injured. He's barely breathing." Another beat of silence, long enough for Wade to hear the insects in the brush, the faint rattle of dry grass, the soft ticking of his engine cooling in the heat. "Harlow," the dispatcher finally said, cautious. "Are you sure you're looking at him?" Wade forced his tone steady. "I'm not messing around. I need wildlife out here now." The reply came clipped and bureaucratic, the way systems responded when reality didn't fit the form. "We'll notify state. Could be ours. Stay clear." Ours. Wade stared past the dashboard through the windshield where the road ran straight as a blade into shimmering emptiness. "Ours out here with this heat and an injured animal." He didn't have to be a wildlife expert to know what dehydration looked like. He didn't have to be a doctor to recognize that a creature that big didn't lie down unless it had run out of choices. He shut the radio off. The sudden quiet inside the cab felt heavy. Outside, the lion exhaled long and faint. Wade stepped out again, walked to the bed of his truck, and flipped open the toolbox. His hands moved out of habit work gloves, tarp rope, first aid kit, and 2 plastic jugs of water he kept for emergencies when crews got stranded, when someone underestimated the heat, when routine turned into a headline. He lifted one jug and held it for a moment as if the weight could answer the question forming in his chest. You don't go near a lion. You also don't stand there and watch something die if you can do something. Wade knew in that instant the kind of man he'd been trying to become since he left the city and took this job quiet, useful, the kind of man who didn't make problems bigger. But he also knew the kind of man he'd been before, the man who looked away because it wasn't his responsibility. That version of him still lived somewhere behind his ribs, and he'd spent years building a life sturdy enough to keep that man from taking the wheel again. He walked toward the lion, carefully slow, staying well outside, striking distance. He set the water jug down on the dirt, then nudged it forward with the toe of his boot until it rested in a patch of shade thrown by a stunted mesquite. He didn't pour it out. He didn't wave his arms. He didn't try to coax the lion like a pet. He simply placed the water where it could be found. Then he backed away. The lion's nostrils flared faintly. His ears twitched. Amber eyes slid toward the jug, then back to Wade, as if weighing the offer against a lifetime of instinct. Wade held still. The desert held still with him. Minutes passed. The sun crawled. Heat shimmered. Finally, with the effort of an entire body refusing to give up, the lion shifted his head a fraction. His tongue, dry dark, slid out and touched the dirt once, like testing the world. Then slowly he dragged himself an inch closer. Another inch. The movement wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was stubborn and small and real. Wade's chest tightened. He wanted to step forward, to lift the jug, to do something more than watch. But he didn't, because this was still a lion. Because mercy without respect could become arrogance. Because one wrong move could turn kindness into disaster. The lion reached the jug and with trembling precision lowered his mouth to the rim. He drank not greedily, like he didn't have the strength for greed. Just steady, careful pulls, as if each swallow was a negotiation with life. His shoulders trembled. His eyelids fluttered. Wade felt his eyes sting, and the sensation startled him. He hadn't cried in a long time. He wasn't even sure this was sadness. It felt more like the pressure of witnessing something sacred in a place that didn't believe in softness. The afternoon light shifted, turning less white and more gold. Shadows lengthened on the road. The desert didn't cool gently when the sun dropped. It fell fast, and night out here could be brutal in a different way. State wildlife could take hours. The lion might not have hours. Wade walked back to his truck and pulled the tarp free. Plastic snapped in the heat as he unfolded it. He planted 2 metal stakes into the dirt-tied rope between them and rigged the tarp into a slanted patch of shade, small, imperfect, but enough to cover the lion's head and shoulders where the sun punished hardest. When he finished, he stepped back and looked at what he'd made, a small triangle of mercy in a landscape that offered none for free. The lion lay beneath it, breathing a little deeper now, the water jug by his muzzle like an answered prayer. Wade sat down on the far side of the road, back against his truck tire, knees, bent hands resting on his thighs. He kept his distance. He kept his eyes on the lion. A pickup passed in the distance, raising a faint ribbon of dust. It didn't slow. Nobody saw what was happening on this forgotten strip of road. Nobody would believe it if they did. Wade looked at the lion again. The amber eyes were open, and for the first time Wade understood something that made his throat tighten even more. The lion wasn't just exhausted. He was lost. Not in the way an animal got lost on a map. In the way something could be stranded far outside the story it was meant to live. Wade's radio crackled suddenly, startling him. He reached into the cab and turned it up. Harlow, the dispatcher, said, voice thinner now, "State Wildlife's on another call. They're coming, but it'll be late." "How late?" Wade asked. A pause, the kind that carried paperwork and limitations like extra weight. "After dark." Wade stared at the shadow line creeping across the brush. He swallowed, then spoke softly, more to himself than to the radio. After dark might be too late. He turned the radio off again. Then he looked back at the lion under the tarp, the water jug at his mouth, the slow rise and fall of his rib cage. Wade breathed in, tasting dust and heat, and made a decision that didn't feel brave. It felt inevitable. He wasn't leaving. And somewhere in the thinning light, as the desert began to shift toward evening, the lion blinked once, slow, deliberate, like he had heard Wade's choice and stored it somewhere deeper than instinct. Wade leaned his head back against the tire and whispered, not knowing why he spoke at all. "Hang on," he said, "just hang on." And when the lion's eyes stayed open a second longer, fixed on him through the wavering air, Wade realized the most unsettling part of the entire day wasn't that the lion had appeared here. It was that somehow it looked like the lion had been waiting for him. Night didn't arrive all at once. It withdrew the light slowly, as if the desert wanted to see who would panic first. Shadows slid through the brush, stretched across the road, and erased small details one by one, pebbles, dry grass, tire tracks, until the world was reduced to shape, breath, and distance. Wade Harlow stayed where he was, back against the front tire of his pickup, eyes locked on the patch of shade where the lion lay. The tarp fluttered lightly in the wind. The water jug near the lion's muzzle had tipped, but it wasn't empty. The lion drank again, slower now, as if his body were rationing every swallow. Then he lifted his head. Only a few inches. It was enough to tighten every muscle in Wade's body. The lion looked directly at him. The amber eyes were still dulled by exhaustion, but there was more focus now, like someone coming out of a fever, not healed but present. Wade kept his hands visible, palms open, his body angled slightly sideways, remembering what an old ranger once told him. "I'm not coming closer," Wade said quietly. "I'm right here." The lion watched him for several long seconds. Then he lowered his head again. A truce, silent, fragile. The temperature dropped fast. Once the sun slipped behind the low hills, the heat of the day drained from the air almost violently. Wade pulled his jacket tighter, the cold creeping into his wrists and collar. He climbed into the cab, left the engine off, and rolled the window halfway down. He didn't want noise to startle the lion or to miss any change in breathing. Darkness thickened. Stars punched through the fading blue, sharp and unforgiving. Wade tried to anchor his thoughts in what he understood: breathing patterns, posture, distance, time. But memory doesn't always ask permission. A hospital room surfaced in his mind. Machines whispering. A monitor ticking out numbers that felt too fragile to trust. A doctor's voice, careful and tired. "We did what we could." Wade clenched his jaw and forced the memory down. Not now. Not tonight. Tonight was about a lion still breathing and a man counting those breaths like they were the only thing keeping the world upright. Headlights appeared in the distance. A pickup approached slowly, curiosity outweighing certainty. It stopped at a cautious distance. A man stepped out, followed by a woman. Both froze when they saw the shape beneath the tarp. "What the hell is that?" the man asked, his voice cracking. Wade moved without thinking, placing himself between them and the brush. "Stay back," he said. "He's injured." The woman whispered as if volume alone could cause harm. "Is that a lion?" "Yes," Wade said. "And he's not a tourist attraction." The man raised his phone, then hesitated when Wade shook his head. "Pictures won't help him," Wade said. "Calling it in already has." They stood there for a few tense seconds, eyes wide, then backed away. The truck pulled off, leaving behind a thin ribbon of dust and a silence that felt heavier than before. The road settled again. But quiet didn't mean safe. Coyotes yipped somewhere far off, their calls thin and sharp. Wade felt his muscles tighten at every sound. His body stayed coiled, ready for a threat that didn't come. The lion shifted once. Not a lunge, not a rise, just a small adjustment of weight. A low sound escaped his throat. Not a growl, not a roar, something closer to a sigh. Wade leaned forward, listening. Steady breathing. The radio crackled suddenly loud in the night. Wade turned it on, heart jumping. Harlow, the dispatcher, said, "Wildlife's been rerouted. Earliest ETA is after midnight." Wade closed his eyes for a brief second. Midnight meant colder air. It meant fatigue. It meant the lion's body would have to hold together long enough for strangers to decide his fate. "Copy," Wade said evenly, though his hands trembled. He set the radio down and rubbed his palms against his jeans. He looked back at the lion. The injured paw was still tucked tight against his chest like a secret he refused to give up. "I'll be here," Wade said aloud, as if the words needed weight. "I'm not leaving." The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of water from the canal and the sharper scent of concrete from the dam. Night insects tuned themselves into a thin electric hum beneath everything else. Time stretched. Minutes lost their meaning. Just before midnight, the lion moved again. He dragged his hindquarters a few inches, testing his weight. Wade rose halfway from the cab, ready to retreat if needed. The lion didn't lunge. He settled, exhaled. Then his eyes opened once more. They found Wade in the darkness, illuminated faintly by starlight and the dull glow of the dashboard. The gaze held unblinking, aware. Not gratitude, recognition. Wade felt it again, that unsettling sense from earlier, stronger now. Not that the lion saw him as a savior, but as a witness, someone who would remember if he didn't make it through the night. "You're not alone," Wade said quietly. "Not tonight." Headlights cut across the road again, this time more than one set. Wade straightened, knowing the vigil of the night was ending, and the real test was about to begin. The vehicles didn't rush in. They slowed as they approached, as if instinctively recognizing that speed would break something fragile. Headlights washed over the brush, carving sharp edges out of dust and shadow. Wade stood where he was letting his silhouette appear, first a human shape separating light from the lion beneath the tarp. Doors opened, boots hit gravel. Low voices traded quick assessments. "There," someone said softly. "That's him." A wildlife officer stepped forward, stopping well short of the brush. She wore a tan jacket, sleeves rolled, movements controlled. Her flashlight stayed angled low, never landing directly on the lion's face. "How long's he been down?" she asked. "Since this afternoon," Wade said. "He's still breathing." She nodded without looking at him, eyes fixed on the rise and fall beneath the tarp. "You put the water and shade in place." "I did," Wade replied. "I stayed back." Another man approached, older, heavier county badge clipped to his belt. His stance was rigid, impatient. "This isn't a pet rescue," he said flatly. "If he spooks, we don't play hero." Wade met his gaze. "He hasn't spooked, not once." The man snorted. "He's a lion." "I know what he is," Wade said quietly. "I also know what he's not doing." The lion shifted at the sound of voices, a subtle tightening through his shoulders. The officer raised a hand. "Quiet." Everyone froze. The flashlight dimmed. Radios went silent. For a long moment, the only sound was breathing human and otherwise sharing the same dark. The lion settled again. The officer exhaled. "He's exhausted," she said. "Whatever brought him here took everything." "Which means we don't crowd him," Wade said. She glanced at him, surprised, then nodded. "Agreed." The county official frowned. "We can't leave him here. Homes are less than 5 miles out." "We're not leaving him," the officer replied. "We're stabilizing." "State wants options," the man pressed. "Sedation, transport, or—" Wade finished, his voice flat. The word hung there heavy and ugly. The officer didn't look away from the lion. Only if there's immediate danger. Right now there isn't. Something loosened in Wade's chest, not relief. Permission. They sat up quietly. A tripod light angled away from the brush. Radios lowered to murmurs. The officer crouched and sketched a plan in the dirt with a gloved finger. Approach angle, wind direction, dart distance if it came to that. "How far did you say he traveled?" she asked. "I don't know," Wade said. "Far enough to forget where water was." She nodded. "That tracks." The county official checked his watch. "We need a decision before sunrise." Wade looked at the lion again, the steady breathing, the injured paw still tucked tight like pride itself. "He needs time," Wade said. "If you move him now, you might finish what the desert started." The officer studied him. "You're invested." "I'm present," Wade replied. "There's a difference." She considered that, then turned to her radio. Voices murmured, procedural clipped. Minutes passed. The desert didn't care. When the call ended, she stood. "We wait until first light," she said. "Minimal intervention. Fluids at a distance if he'll take them. No sedation unless he deteriorates." The county official opened his mouth, then closed it. He wasn't happy, but he wasn't in charge. "Sir," the officer said to Wade, "you don't have to stay." Wade watched the lion's ears flick once, responding to a sound only he could hear. "I know," Wade said, "but I am." She nodded, accepting it. "Then keep your distance. Keep your voice low. If he moves, you move back." Wade managed a thin smile. "Been doing that all night." They settled into a rhythm that felt less like a rescue and more like a vigil. The officer monitored from afar. The county official retreated to make calls. Wade stayed where he'd been all along, present, quiet, unremarkable. Hours crept toward dawn. The lion shifted again, lifting his head higher than before. His eyes were clearer now, sharper. Wade straightened instinctively. "It's okay," Wade said, not to soothe the lion, but to anchor himself. The lion held Wade's gaze for a long moment. In it, Wade sensed something raw and unromantic, not gratitude, not trust. Recognition. As if the lion understood that this man wasn't trying to control the ending. Color crept back into the world, muted purples, soft grays, the first hint of heat returning. Dawn broke slowly. The lion tested his weight, brushing the injured paw against the dirt. A low sound escaped him, frustration more than pain. "He's waking up," the officer said. Wade took a step back, exactly as instructed. The lion's head followed him. For a split second, instinct flared, "What if this is it?" But the lion stopped. He adjusted, settled, and exhaled. Wade let out the breath he'd been holding. "You see," he said quietly, to no one in particular, "he's choosing stillness." The officer watched the scene with a new expression, less clinical, more thoughtful. "Animals don't choose stillness unless they have to," she said. "Or unless they know moving won't help," Wade replied. Morning light washed the land clean of shadow. The tarp fluttered. The water jug lay tipped, but not empty. The lion lay alive. A medic truck rolled in, tires crunching, bringing equipment meant for distance and care without contact. The plan shifted from waiting to doing. The officer approached Wade one last time. "Once we start," she said, "this changes. He won't be aware of you the same way." Wade nodded. He'd known this moment was coming. "You did good," she added. Not loudly, not ceremoniously, just enough to be true. Wade looked back at the lion as the team took their positions. The lion's eyes found him again, steady, unblinking in the new light. Wade didn't wave. He stayed. And as the desert fully woke around them, he understood that whatever happened next, whatever decisions were made, this part of the story was already written. A man chose not to walk away, and a dying lion noticed. Morning didn't arrive with celebration. It crept in cautiously, pale and thin, as if the desert itself wasn't sure it should witness what came next. The air carried a new sharpness, cool enough to raise gooseflesh on Wade's arms, as daylight stripped the scene of illusion. Clipboards appeared. Radios crackled. Procedure stepped forward, and patience was asked to move aside. A man in a clean state vest arrived, boots still free of dust. His eyes moved quickly, measuring risk instead of life. He listened as the wildlife officer briefed him, nodding, interrupting once to clarify distance, public safety protocols, containment options. Wade felt the shift immediately. The night had belonged to restraint. Daylight belonged to policy. "So," the official said, folding his arms as he looked toward the lion, "we're clear. This animal poses a potential threat. Residential zones are within range." "He hasn't moved toward anyone," the officer replied. "He hasn't even stood." "That can change," the man said. "Fast." Wade stepped forward before he realized he was moving. "So can dehydration," he said. "So can shock." The official glanced at him, irritation flickering. "And you are?" "Wade Harlow," he answered. "I found him. I stayed." The man nodded once, dismissive. "Then you understand this is out of your hands now." Wade didn't back up. "I understand that if you rush this, you could kill him." Silence stretched. The wind lifted the tarp's edge just enough to reveal the lion's mane, dull gold against gray dirt. His chest worked steadily, a bellows patched too many times. The wildlife officer broke the stalemate. "We can administer fluids remotely," she said. "Stabilize him before transport." "And sedation?" the official asked. "Not yet," she replied. "He's weak, too weak. The margins are thin." "State doesn't like thin margins." Wade thought of the phrase acceptable loss and felt something dense stir behind his ribs. The lion shifted subtle, but enough to pull every eye. A low sound slipped from his throat. Not aggressive, not pleading, just present. "He's telling us something," Wade said. "He's an animal," the official scoffed. "Yes," Wade replied, "and animals know when they're being cornered." A call came over the officer's radio. She listened, nodded once, then looked up. "Authorization granted for delayed sedation," she said. "Observation window only." The official's jaw tightened, but he stepped back. "You're responsible." "I know," she said. They moved carefully after that. A technician approached from downwind, setting a collapsible container near the brush. A long tube extended, allowing water and electrolytes to flow without forcing proximity. The lion's ears flicked. His nostrils tested the air. He hesitated, then drank. More confidently this time. Color crept back into his eyes, not brightness but clarity. The official paced, checking his watch too often. "We can't sit here all day," he muttered. "You can," Wade said quietly. "You just don't want to." An hour passed like a held breath. The tarp was adjusted inch by inch as the sun climbed. At a distant siren, the lion lifted his head, muscles tightening just enough to remind everyone what lived beneath the exhaustion. "Hold," the officer whispered. No one moved. The lion lowered his head again. The moment dissolved. "Vitals are improving," the officer said after checking her monitor. Plans shifted: longer prep, gentler sedation, wider perimeter. The dart rifle came out. Wind was checked with a pinch of dust. Distance recalculated. "Clean shot," the officer said. "No rush." The lion's ears flicked. His head turned, scanning shapes. For the first time since Wade found him, the ghost of power stood up inside that body. "Hold," she whispered again. The dart fired with a soft hiss. It struck the lion's shoulder cleanly. He flinched, confusion flashing. A low growl rumbled short, bewildered. He tried to rise. Wade's body locked. The lion pushed up, lifted his chest a few inches. The injured paw failed, instantly folding beneath him. He dropped back with a heavy thud that trembled through the dirt. "Easy," the officer said, voice steady. "Easy." The lion's breathing quickened. His tail lashed once, twice. His eyes, bright now, found Wade. For a fraction of a second, the world narrowed to that look. Wade didn't move. He didn't wave or speak. He stayed visible. Still. Exactly as he had been all along. The drug took hold in stages. Muscle by muscle, resistance softened. The growl faded. The head dipped, lifted, dipped again, then rested on the dirt. A collective exhale moved through the group, not relief, something closer to gratitude. They worked quickly but gently. Straps placed. A reinforced transport cage rolled in. The lion was guided onto a sled and eased inside his size, filling the space even in sleep. The door closed with a final metallic click. Wade felt an ache behind his ribs as the open desert suddenly felt empty. "Move now," the official said. "Helicopter inbound." The cage was secured. Straps tightened, dust lifted. Then something changed. A wrong sound, subtle scraping. The lion's tail twitched. Eyelids fluttered. "He's metabolizing faster," a technician said, lighter than expected. The lion's eyes opened fully. He lifted his head, confusion, sharp awareness, snapping back like a wire pulled tight. A paw struck the cage wall. not rage, disbelief. "Hold position," the officer said sharply. "No noise." The helicopter's thrum crept into the air. The sound reached the lion, vibrating through steel and ground. He stilled, sat there, massive and restrained, eyes wide, listening. For one long heartbeat, Wade imagined chaos. Then the lion's gaze cut through dust and light and found him. Fear was there, but not of people, of the unknown. Wade stepped forward a single pace, still outside the safety line, and raised one hand, palm open. Not a command, an acknowledgement. "It's okay," he said quietly. "It's moving, that's all." The officer glanced at him, tense, then let it go. The drug pulled the lion under again. His head lowered, eyes closed. The cage lifted, carried toward the aircraft. Wade stayed where he was, watching the space the lion had occupied empty out. The helicopter rose, carrying steel and fur and a life balanced between worlds, then dwindled to a speck. The desert swallowed the tracks almost immediately. As engines shut down and people dispersed, Wade stood alone by his truck, dust and fuel in the air. Whatever came next for the lion, wherever he woke, something irreversible had already happened. The narrowest margin had held. The helicopter's sound faded faster than Wade expected. One moment it was a physical thing. Vibration in the chest, dust spiraling upward, air chopped into pieces by rotating blades. The next it was gone, swallowed by sky and distance, leaving behind a silence that felt too ordinary for what had just lifted out of it. Wade stood beside his truck, one hand resting on the warm metal, staring at the empty patch of dirt where the lion had nearly died. The place already looked unchanged. No mark, no sign, just brush, dust, and heat beginning to creep back in, as if the desert were eager to reclaim the moment and deny it ever happened. People didn't linger. The county official left first, already on his phone, voice clipped and moving on. The technicians packed equipment with practiced efficiency. The wildlife officer paused, once met Wade's eyes from across the road, and gave a small nod. No speech, no handshake, just acknowledgement. By mid-afternoon, the road was empty again. Wade drove home with the windows down, letting wind strip the smell of fuel and dust from his clothes. He told himself the story was over. The lion was in better hands now, veterinarians, controlled environments, decisions made far from heat and desperation. That was how these things ended, except the ending refused to settle. Days passed, then weeks. Wade returned to routine. Canal checks, reservoir readings, meetings that blurred together. People asked him about the lion in lowered voices, curiosity sharpened by disbelief. Was it real? Yes. Did it survive? Yes. What happened to it? I don't know, he said, because that was the only honest answer. Then one evening his phone rang. It was the wildlife officer. The lion had been treated for dehydration and infection. The injury to his paw was old, not fatal, painful but manageable. More importantly, he'd been cleared for release, far from roads, far from people, in a protected stretch of land where the desert opened into something closer to its original promise. "Tomorrow," she said, "at first light." Wade hung up and sat at his kitchen table long after the call ended. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet he'd once worked hard to build. Now it felt unfinished. He drove out before dawn. The release site lay miles from anything resembling a town. A wide basin of low grass and scattered rock, where the land rolled gently instead of cutting sharp. The air was cool, carrying the rare scent of damp earth from a night drizzle. Wade parked well back, exactly where he was told, and waited. The cage arrived on a flatbed with a single escort truck. No helicopter this time, no spectacle. Just people who understood how easily moments like this could be ruined by attention. The lion lay awake inside the cage. His eyes tracked movement with calm precision, not dulled, not frantic. Weeks of care had restored something essential. His mane looked fuller now, darker at the roots, lifting slightly in the breeze. Wade felt his throat tighten. He didn't move closer. He didn't raise a hand. Recognition, if it happened, didn't need encouragement. The officer checked the locks, nodded, gave the signal. The cage door didn't swing open dramatically. It slid back with a low metallic sound that carried across the basin. For a long moment, the lion didn't move. Then he stood. Muscle rolled beneath healed skin. He tested his weight, placing the injured paw down carefully, held it, shifted. The limb bore him. Wade exhaled, realizing he'd been holding his breath again. The lion stepped out of the cage and into open ground. Grass brushed his legs. The earth accepted his weight. He paused, head high, scenting the air, reading a world that belonged to him in a way no human ever could. Then he turned his head. His gaze passed over uniforms, vehicles, shapes that no longer mattered. And then it found Wade. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't sentiment. It was simpler than that. Awareness, like a door closing softly between two chapters of the same story. Wade didn't nod, didn't wave. He let the moment be exactly what it was. The lion turned away and walked into the land, not running, not hurrying. He crested a low rise, paused once, then disappeared beyond it. The basin looked unchanged, but something in Wade wasn't. Summer tightened its grip not long after. The reservoir dropped inch by inch, pale rings of old shoreline emerging like scars. Creeks fell silent. Birds clustered closer to the canal at dusk, restless and loud. Wade felt it before the alarms came. In the grit carried by the wind, in the numbers that didn't dip anymore, they slid. Then came the calls. Animals near fences. Deer thin and frantic. Wild horses pressing too close to roads, eyes rolling white in headlights. By the third night, panic joined hunger. A section of fencing near the southern homes went down under pressure, wood splintering, wire sagging. Emergency crews staged lights and vehicles trying to form barriers without triggering a stampede. Wade stood with them, radio clipped to his collar, heart heavy with recognition. This wasn't something you could shout at. Fear only multiplied fear. Then the sound came, low, distant, a roar, not rage, authority. It rolled across the flats, and the animals nearest the fence hesitated, heads lifted, bodies angled away from the houses, pulled by something stronger than desperation. From the darkness a shape emerged, large, unmistakable. The lion stepped into the wash of light mane, catching dust and glow. He didn't charge. He didn't rush. He placed himself where movement funneled tightest, standing between the town and the surge of bodies pressing toward it. He roared again, short, controlled bursts, turning his head to direct the flow, pressing the herd sideways away from noise and light toward darker ground where water sometimes lingered. The animals responded, not perfectly, but enough. The pressure eased. The line bent. Danger slid past doors and windows instead of through them. Wade watched, stunned. This wasn't instinct alone. It was restraint. When the last of the herd passed, the lion stepped back. He turned his head toward the town, toward Wade. Their eyes met across dust and light, across months and distance. There was no triumph in the look, only completion. The lion turned and vanished into the night. By morning, the story was already changing. Videos too short, captions too loud, arguments about what people thought they saw. Wade let it go. The water still needed managing, the land still demanded care, but something had shifted. Meetings paused a fraction longer before defaulting to force. Plans asked about timing instead of speed. Corridors replaced barricades. The desert learned new paths, and Wade learned what the lion had shown him. Mercy wasn't weakness. Restraint wasn't inaction. They were choices that carried weight long after the moment passed, shaping outcomes you couldn't predict, but could recognize when they arrived. The canal whispered faintly again one evening as stars came out. Wade stood, brushed dust from his hands, and headed home. The story didn't belong to him. It belonged to the land. This story reminds us that true strength often appears as restraint rather than force. In moments of fear or uncertainty, the instinct to act quickly can cause irreversible harm, while patience can preserve life and restore balance. Wade's choice to wait rather than dominate or destroy, demonstrates how empathy, respect for nature, and thoughtful decision-making can ripple outward in ways no policy or prediction can measure. Education is not only about knowledge, but about judgment, knowing when to intervene and when to step back. When we honor time, life often finds a way to answer.